Welcome to this presentation on current trends and future use of social media. This presentation contains the findings of a study for the NHS Confederation carried out by Cogitamus Ltd. My name is Joe McCrea and I'm Director of the Cogitamus Health Practice. This study was published in August 2012. Please note that this presentation is copyright for Cogitamus Ltd. We would be grateful if you do not copy, edit or otherwise extract or reproduce contents without explicit written authorization. First, a few notes about the research. The research consisted of a 3-month study, including an online survey and in-depth interviews carried out with leading social media practitioners. In all, 25 organisations took part, the majority in the NHS and health sector, but also some in the wider public sector, for example, the Department for Business Innovation and Skills, the Met Office, and the Innovation Unit, an education think tank. We also involved some private sector organisations such as the CBI, Q Magazine and Warp Films to give a perspective completely outside the public sector. First, a few notes about the context in which these findings are presented. First of all, it's generally acknowledged that interest in social media is growing exponentially, particularly amongst public sector organisations. Many have dipped their toe in the water and tried a few initial attempts at using social media. The majority are still hesitant or unsure. In particular, most public sector organisations are unsure about how to actually implement a social media capacity within their own organisation. Just before this survey was published, Ofcom published its latest market research data. This showed that social media is here to stay and is being adopted in increasingly large amounts. According to Ofcom, social media is now used daily to communicate by about 1/3 of adults. It is the biggest claimed increase in communication, an increase of 31%, used in the past 2 years amongst 16 to 24-year-olds, a notoriously difficult to reach group for public sector organisations. Ofcom also found that the average consumer now spends around 90 minutes a week on social networking sites, and when asked about how the methods to communicate with friends and family on a daily basis, 68% use any text-based methods and 63% use voice-based services. So it's clear that social media is becoming the norm for ways in which to communicate. This impression was reinforced by some of the people who we interviewed. In particular, one interviewee told us, "I don't think social media is going to go away. The numbers of people using it are massive, and whilst it might not be doing very much each, collectively it's very powerful. The tools will change, but the dynamic won't go away." But let's take an overall context check here, and let's accept that social media of itself is not new. All social media does is purport to deliver more modern, rapid, convenient, effective and engaging set of tools and behaviours to enable individuals and organisations to more fully communicate and engage. And it does so by promising to harness the benefits of newly emerged technology and platforms. Heard this before? I'm sure the people who invented and proposed communication towers on the Great Wall of China, Roman fire beacons, Morse, the Pony Express, the Gutenberg press, television, mobile phones, the internet, all said the same thing in their own time. And most of them were true. But let's also take a reality check and recognise that management fads aren't new either. In particular, remember knowledge management? Very popular around the turn of the century and promised big results. In particular, lots of organisations got very excited about the promise of knowledge management to enable them to know what they know. Unfortunately, knowledge management, particularly when it changed into something called KM, a self-referencing industry, ended up divorced from core outcomes or organisational needs. If you're proposing to do a social media strategy, you must avoid this trap and ensure that your social media strategy and your social media aims is aligned with your organisation's core mission and drivers. You also can't half-do social media. As one interviewee told us, social media blurs the line between PR, journalism, customer service, interaction, branding. All of these things start to mesh into one. It has to be more than a little department of what you do. To do it successfully, you have to seed it through everything that you do. Another interviewer told us, if you do social media and you simply do it as a top-down exercise, you may as well not do it at all. But if you treat it as conversation, that's where the value of it is. Because you don't just get into the individual examples of individuals' hopes, fears and ideas, but to everyone else watching that conversation, you're seen to do it and show that you care. So if you're proposing within an organisation to do social media, recognise you can't half do it. One way to look at it is to look at the difference between organisations which are broadcasters and organisations which are communitarians. Broadcasters see social media as simply another comms channel to continue their traditional habit of announcing things or speaking at people. This approach will not work for social media. In contrast, communitarians see their role as engaging, listening, responding, supporting and participating in communities of individuals. This communitarian approach is what lies at the heart of successful social media. Our interviewees and respondents to our survey were very clear that communities are at the heart of social media and that successful communitarian approach really delivers value. As one very experienced interviewee told us, I think what we'll start to see is an interest and resurgence in traditional social media. So wind the web right back and come back to forums, communities, comments on websites. I think it's probably where the value is for most organisations. Another interviewee went on to talk about the value of comments and conversations. The value of replying to people is enormous because it gets the conversation going, it shows you value them, and it gives you a sense of what they think. You're doing your live market research there and then. Very importantly, a lesson to be learned is you cannot create communities when they don't already exist. One successful social media practitioner reflected on lessons learned. She said, "We used to try to create our own online network for people who'd come on our courses, and the reality was no one was really using them. They said they wanted to, but our head of digital said to me at the time, all the evidence says, go to where the people are. Don't set up new networks, go to where they are." Another interviewee told us, almost anything that you can classify as an attempt to use social media is immediately a failure. Social media works best when they're built upon communities which already exist and are a continuous part of the organisation's activity. Intervening artificially into that ecosystem or trying to create one from scratch is rarely successful. So remember, when you're building social media activities and capacity, build them on communities and take the time to identify where these communities based around your organisation exist already. We also need to think, once you've identified the communities that exist, how you can engage them. And in doing so, you need to think, why do people engage in online communities? Why do they engage in some and don't engage on the other? And there are certain things that people engage in online communities in order to achieve. Bear in mind, people by and large are not altruistic. They have a wide range of online communities with which they could interact. They go for the ones that deliver things that they need. Some examples. I might engage in an online community because by doing so I gain vital information and knowledge that I couldn't find elsewhere. I might do it because it enhances my own visibility and reputation. particularly amongst my peers or professional colleagues. I might do it because it's the best way to keep abreast of the latest opportunities within my policy area, my work ethic, my area of interest. I might do it because it's a way in which I can access tools and techniques which enable me to carry out my work better than if I never had them. I might simply do it to keep in touch with what's happening so I don't miss the boat. Or I might do it to link up with similar people or people who have skills and experience which I need or into which I want to engage. We asked our respondents of our survey, what are you doing with social media now and how frequently are you doing it? We also asked, in the future, what are you planning to do and with what frequency? We asked about 21 business activities, which we grouped broadly into 3 areas: broadcasting activities, listening activities, and communitarian activities. Here's the list of the broadcasting activities that we asked about: building and brand organisational presence, communicating to people, to the media, to members, to stakeholders or external bodies, to customers and service users, to the public and the wider world. We also asked about live casting and webcasting. Here's the listening activities we asked about: online polling, opinion mapping, gaining information or feedback from people, the media, members, member organisations, stakeholders, external bodies, customers, service users, public, and the wider world. Most crucially, we asked about communitarian activities: enhancing peer-to-peer interaction internally in the organisation, or between members, or between service users, or between the public. Supporting or enhancing face-to-face meetings or events, hosting online meetings or events, facilitating interactive research or academic collaboration, and most crucially, hosting or facilitating communities of practice or communities of interest. The results of our survey were quite striking. We found that at present, the majority are fairly regularly broadcasting. It's a regular activity. They are listening occasionally, not all the time, but occasionally. But in the large, at the moment, they are not carrying out the wider and more rich communitarian activities. Bear in mind for our research, this is what the majority are doing. 1 or 2 notable exceptions were doing communitarian activities and doing them very well as we speak. However, when we asked the organisations, what do you plan to do in the future? All of them said, we regularly intend to broadcast, listen and act in a communitarian fashion. So it's clear that this is the trend with which social media is going, and it's where most organisations are now looking and are currently actively reviewing their communications functions, their social media functions, their listening functions, their stakeholder management functions. If your organisation is not at the present planning for the future to become a communitarian organisation, you are already behind the curve. So let's look at what people are using. Now here, broadly, social media is dominated by what we call the 4 musketeers. Of our surveys, 94% of our respondents said they use Twitter for organisational purposes. 67% use LinkedIn or YouTube, and 61% use Facebook. Now these 4 musketeers dominate the social media landscape, but they coexist, and it's important to understand why they coexist. And they coexist because they serve complementary purposes for organisations in different ways. It's important to understand the different purposes they serve because depending on the nature of your own specific organisation, you may wish to place greater emphasis on one of the 4 musketeers than another. Let's take the first, Twitter. used by 94% of organisations. The main purposes for Twitter are for breaking news, for monitoring stories and events, for instant comment, instant reaction, and for brand promotion. Twitter is like a more modern version of the old PA newswires and rapid rebuttal operations. It's important to recognise not only the specific purposes that Twitter serves, but also who's on there and who's on Twitter. Primarily, not exclusively, but primarily, it's the journalists, it's the commentariat, it's think tanks, it's opinion formers, it's corporate accounts, it's leaders. As far as the public sector and organisations are concerned, these are the people that mainly use Twitter and will be interested in the material that organisations are putting out. We had some interesting comments about Twitter from our survey respondents. One interviewee described Twitter as a vast and interconnected world of multiple conversations going on about every single topic of conversation you can imagine, with every single possible combination of participants you can imagine, all going on in one sentence bites. He described it as the equivalent of having a conversation on a mountaintop, which everyone can join in and where everyone can hear you. Of course, what this means is there is a large amount of activity on Twitter which is going on, which organisations and public sector organisations will not have an interest in, certainly in terms of furthering their own aims. But the fact that they would say things to the Twitter audience that Twitter audience want to hear shows that it is a place where your organisation can have those conversations on mountaintops, which everyone can join in and which everyone can hear. Another interviewee told us it's where the real conversation in the country takes place. It's fast, it's immediate, it's not in any way mediated by editors or scheduling or waiting for the guy from the phone-in programme to get into your number. There's nothing to stop you having your say. It's immensely powerful, it's immensely pervasive. That's why 94% of respondents say they use it. So, how to use Twitter very well? Well, a good practice recommendation from probably the leading organisation using Twitter that we interviewed made very clear that what's important is separating out specific Twitter feeds, specific Twitter presences, rather than just having one great big corporate Twitter feed which contains everything. She said, we have a strategy that can separate out our clever and articulated people by their specialist subject. So we can recognise that while we have 2 or 3 people who might comment very generally and get engaged and sometimes quite close to the line debate, we much extend the reach if we have someone, for example, with a particular strength and audience in social care or another in public health, but they each have their own audience. And we're careful to make sure we don't duplicate in our corporate feed what those individuals do. A good example was this organisation had a report of mental health, not an area they do lots and lots of stuff in, and we wanted to engage with it and get as much reach as possible. So this organisation said, we engage with lots of mental health organisations, and we said, we want to go really hard on this day. This is what we want tweeted, and we hit the bloggers. And we just made a nice buzz and noise on the day, much greater than we'd just gone through the usual email traffic. It's important also for organisations to recognise the behaviour that is expected of Twitter. As one person said, a good tweeter has to be doing it regularly. It's a river where you get in, swim around a bit and get out. You don't put it on a weekly to-do list and only do it once a week. Also, you need people who tweet with a personality, who are always up for a conversation. People who do it badly are the people who only do it to put across corporate speak, and they're dull beyond measure. But a word of warning from a very experienced social media practitioner. He said to us, who really follows everything that a Twitter corporate account puts out? It's only as good as your latest update, so what if your tweet happens to miss people's refresh point? We have 33,000 followers, but if there's one thing that gets my back up, it's when audience say, we can put it out to our audience of 33,000 on Twitter. This person pointed out, we don't have an audience of 33,000 on Twitter. We have 33,000 people who at any one time might see the odd tweet from us, which is very different. And this person reinforced the point we were making earlier about the communities. So going to the places where our audience are is absolutely key. So that's Twitter. Now let's look at LinkedIn, used by 67% of organisations. Slightly different purpose here. Yes, it's for brand promotion, but it's also where professionals get together, peer-to-peer professional networking. LinkedIn is also the place where managed online communities can take place of professionals. It enables polling and opinion and interactive research. It's very good for gathering information and feedback. For public sector organisations, engaging, employing professionals, and with organisations that by and large engage with professionals, LinkedIn is crucial. And that's because of the people who are on there. Professionals and leaders are likely to be found on LinkedIn. Corporate accounts are on LinkedIn. But also ground level staff and stakeholders and users are on LinkedIn. This is where a large scale of the audience with which you wish to engage find themselves. And so when people say, go to the place where your audiences are, go to the place where your communities are, LinkedIn is the place where they are. And let's see what are some of the things that our respondents said about LinkedIn. Very interestingly, one of our organisations said that Twitter is not our social medium of choice for leadership development. For this, we're developing LinkedIn, and we're thinking about how we draw in alumni. We have thousands of people coming through us over the years, so we want to draw them in. How do we develop a relationship with these people over time and allow them to form networks of their own? Build relationships have been built on the programmes and courses with which they've engaged with our organisation. This organisation wants us to do that without having to complete a completely separate network of activity to resource it. One organisation had actually done some interesting social research for their own about their own readership and their own membership. This organisation, this respondent, engaged very heavily with health service users. And they said, we're interested in people who have leadership roles, however broadly defined, in and around the health service. We don't believe these people are really active on Facebook, or if they are, they use Facebook for their purposes, for their social life. In business terms, they're active on Twitter and on LinkedIn. And we've done research that we've most recently done, which appears to confirm of our audience, around half of them on LinkedIn, and of that half, about 20% were active on Twitter. It's worth pointing out, though, that the use of LinkedIn professional communities is still in its early stages and really still needs to be cracked. One of the written survey responses we got said we're still experimenting with LinkedIn decision groups. It's hard to get to know how to get the balance right between actively stimulating discussion and letting the group members get on with it. And another organisation said we're much more developed as what we do on Twitter than we do on LinkedIn, although our LinkedIn user is growing by hundreds of members a month. We want to use LinkedIn as a mini forum for debate. So basically to say, we've written about this, what do you think about it? But it's still early days. And I think that's true for the majority of people seeking to use LinkedIn professional communities. It's early days and people know it's the right thing to do, but nobody's yet cracked the holy grail of how to do it properly. Our third musketeer, YouTube, also owned by 67%, or used by 67%. It's also used for brand promotion and supporting live events. But this is a platform which enables rich multimedia outputs for opinion shaping, for supporting campaigns. This is where presentations, videos, broadcasts, such as this presentation, for example, which you might be seeing on YouTube. YouTube is the greatest place for hosting these facilities and this type of media. And who's on YouTube? There are personal profiles and subscriptions, but also professionals and media organisations go there, and broadcasters and opinion formers. Basically, YouTube is a very, very easy, very good, very well used, popular place to put up your multimedia material. One organisation said, for example, whenever we see an engaging presentation doing the rounds in the organisation, we use people in the press office who've done journalism training to do the voiceover, and then we produce some nice looking material and we put them up on YouTube. And some of these things are getting 2,000 to 3,000 views, and that's people who can't make it easy to friends. And you can do it so easily. We have a media suite here, you can go down and produce something really good in less than an hour. We also use graphics, infographics, and people are getting more used to that and expecting it, just like broadcasters do, using a graphic rather than a table. but it takes a different mindset for people who used to working mainly with words to think about working with images and audio. So one lesson to think about when you're developing your social media capability is that either you will need your own in-house capability for producing this type of material, or you'll need to source it externally. And certainly you'll want to work with your own senior leaders and people within the organisation to educate and train them in the skill set and the mindset to think about the type of material that they can produce, which is more than a long document which can simply be downloaded as a text-based document. Let's look at the final one, Facebook. The fourth popular, but still used by 61%. The purpose, brand promotion again. But this is where people have popular and personal profiles. This is where public sector organisations can tap into public debate and public comments. And not as great as YouTube, but certainly it can also be used as a platform for multimedia outputs. But the membership of Facebook and the way in which people engage on Facebook is different. It is a diametric opposite of LinkedIn. On Facebook, people tend to have their personal profile, their individual profiles. It is a place where campaign groups and service users tend to get together, talk about it, share information, share insights. And this is a good place with which public sector organisations can engage with a service user and community. Again, what do people say about Facebook? Well, one person says, for brands and institutions, Facebook is very good at being interactive, but you can also push out much more varied material. You push out sound, video, pictures, graphs, and you can use the virality of that. People liking it, putting it on their wall, sending it to their friends to create a massive interest around a subject. For example, one person said, our organisation created a little graphic around a campaign we were doing to get out the vote for a major ballot we were running. It simply said, I voted, have you? And it appeared on people's timeline if they shared. I think we had about 60 shares of that, which isn't massive, but when you top that up, most people have around 120 friends. In terms of reach, it's a worthwhile activity. You get thousands of people and generally engage people. Of course, there are other platforms beyond the four musketeers. Here are a few of them. Pinterest, Flickr, SlideShare, MySpace. All of these other platforms, and even ones we're not listing here, is worth investigating to get the best fit for your organisation. Storyfy, for example, can do a nice little story around what's happened on social media itself around a certain topic. SlideShare is a very good place to share presentations. It may well be that rather than viewing this on YouTube, you've actually downloaded it from SlideShare. Flickr, very good for sharing photos. Pinterest is a really interesting one, particularly for younger audiences, and able to create an online pin board and attach stories and information and resources. So don't think just because the four musketeers dominate, you have to use all four of them, or indeed that there isn't any value in using others. Always be curious, always try and find what's out there, always try to think what is the best fit for my specific organisation, or indeed for the specific purpose with which my organisation is looking to use social media in any one particular programme or context or activity. But importantly, no matter what you use, you must realise that whatever social media activity or platforms or channels you try to deploy and support, they will all remain underutilised or less effective if your organisation does not rise to the fundamental underpinning challenge of changing culture and building internal capacity for supporting social media. That's also what our survey respondents and practitioners told us. So how do you rise to the implementation challenge? The first thing you cannot duck, and it comes right back to not half doing social media, is you must allocate dedicated resource to support it. Not as an add-on to somebody's existing job responsibilities, not as a nice to have. It has to be specifically supported with resource. And don't be afraid to use external support if necessary, particularly in the early days if you're trying to introduce a capacity and building up internal capacity before taking it on exclusively internally. Also take the time to understand your existing and your potential social media audiences. Remember what our respondents told us. You need to go where your audience are. You need to go where your communities of professionals and service users and stakeholders and members are. And that takes understanding and it takes research. Don't try and do each social media thing in tramlines or in silos. Integrate your social media activity across your chosen platforms and also across your existing online capabilities and online presence. Mercilessly cross-reference, create links. So if somebody goes to your LinkedIn page, have links to a Twitter feed, have links to relevant Facebook, have links to RSS feeds. If somebody comes into you on a Facebook page, link them back to your Twitter feed, to your LinkedIn group, to your YouTube videos, to your presentations, to your SlideShare, to your Pinterest. If somebody comes into your corporate website, make sure they can easily get from there to your LinkedIn presence. And if your corporate website is around a particular activity, a particular community, a particular research activity, make sure that the links and references and cross-references are directly relevant to that activity, not a generic situation. And also monitor and actively manage your performance. Now, again, don't feel the necessity to overdo this. You can performance manage something to death, but bear in mind that unless you monitor and actively manage your performance in a way that delivers things that are important to you and your organisation, you will not be able to know whether or not you're actually doing the right thing. And recognise that you will have successes as well as failures. When we say monitor and actively manage your performance, don't be afraid if in some areas your performance seems to be going down. That is simply an indication that you need to tweak how you're doing stuff. I hope this presentation has been useful for you. I hope that it's helped give you some pointers to how you might want to go about developing your own social media capability, your own social media strategy. Accompanying this presentation, you will be able to find a link to the full report to download, which contains scores more tips, techniques, quotes, best practice recommendations, poor practice warnings. But if having downloaded the report, or indeed having seen this presentation, you'd like further information, by all means, please feel free to get in touch with me via the Cogitamus Health Practice. Or, if you don't wish to do that, why don't contact me on Twitter or via my LinkedIn? Who knows? If you do so, I might even reply.